What's going on, y'all? Elliot here with MovieFiles. About to head into my early screening of The Smash Machine, directed by Benny Safdie. We got The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt, and it is based on Mark Kerr, the MMA UFC fighter. I'm pretty hyped about this. I know this isn't the Safdie brothers. It's only one of the Safdies, and I'm really intrigued to see what Benny does and what Josh does later with Marty Supreme. But full disclosure, I'm a lifelong Rock fan. Since I was a little kid watching WWE into WWF, the Attitude Era, so on and so forth. And I've been watching his career, not only in wrestling as the most entertaining man on the world, but seeing him transition into acting, obviously, things like The Tooth Fairy, The Scorpion King, but then things like Get Shorty, and of course, Walking Tall and Faster and Snitch. Like, I think The Rock is a entertaining individual. Now, range, acting capabilities, he's even said himself, he's been very limited for most of his career, but this is him escaping in a role and playing the living legend in Mark Kerr. And as someone that, not only did I watch WWE growing up, but I watched UFC. I was never a big fan. I was a casual fan, Ken Shamrock, Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz. I was more of I was really into like Rampage Jackson, Spider, Anderson Silva was in high in their careers. But nonetheless, I'm really looking forward to a great performance by Dwayne, great chemistry with Emily, seeing what Benny Safdie can do on his own, and just having a good, feel-good story. I know that he had his ups and downs. I'm hopeful, man. People are saying The Rock might get a nomination. We'll see. So I'll let y'all know what I thought of The Smash Machine when I get back with my spoiler-free review. I'll see you all on the other side. Alrighty, y'all. Elliot here, back from seeing the new A24 sports drama, The Smashing Machine, directed and written by Benny Safdie, starring Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. Initial impression, full honesty, I'm a bit underwhelmed. I'm a bit underwhelmed by this film for a couple different reasons, but we'll get into that here as we talk about it. So, I gotta say, starting off with the positives first, Benny Safdie is a great director. I think he's a phenomenal director, especially, seeing what he did with his brother with Uncut Gems and Good Times. He subverted my expectations. Mostly, it worked for that subverting of expectations, but some of it I wish that for a boxing movie, for a MMA sports movie, I wish it had a little bit more bite, a little bit more punch. But it is for an MMA, UFC, which is a very violent, very barbaric sport. This is a very quiet, very subtle, very tender and vulnerable film. And for the emotional beats, that works for what we got in this movie. And I thought Benny did a really good job of capturing those. Mark Kerr, if you know anything about him, he's a tank. That's why you cast The Rock. You have to have someone that could physically play the role. But he's known as a gentle giant. And the film takes on that persona. Like, this is again, knowing that how violent MMA and UFC is, and just seeing how very gentle this movie is, it was kind of jarring when I'll be honest, but I was able to settle into the movie. But I thought Benny did a good job of capturing that nuance of just the love of the sport, the love of sportsmanship, but also the love of being a good human being. Mark Kerr, from what we see in this film and what I know about him, I've heard nothing but great things about him as an individual. And I thought Benny did a good job of capturing that tenderness from Mark Kerr. So really solid direction. Also, cinematography-wise, again, knowing what he did in the past with his brother, this is very much handheld, kind of puts you in the action, especially with the fighting sequence, but also the fighting outside the ring, which I'll talk about here in a second with the toxic relationship that we have here. But no, Benny did a good job. Benny did a good job. Performances, let's just get right into it. Do I think this is an Oscar-worthy performance? I don't think this is an Oscar performance, but putting that aside, this is a really great performance by Dwayne Johnson. He escapes in this role. There was very few times where I said to myself, that's The Rock. You can hear the voice coming out. You can see the charisma. But for the most part, I would say 98% of this film, he just disappeared in the role. I think the prosthetics helps. But also, again, making yourself, he's huge. This is the biggest. Pain and Gain, I think, was the biggest I've ever seen The Rock. But this was pretty, he got big for this role. But knowing that he's just big, gigantic, intimidating individual in the ring, out of the ring, but the way The Rock plays him, he makes himself small. And I think Mark Kerr in real life made himself small because he knew how big he was and how intimidating it could be from a normal human being perspective. But I thought Dwayne really captured that tenderness, that carefulness, that, sportsmanship of the game, the honoring of the sport, the honoring of your opponent, but also, which is a little bit of a negative, which we'll talk about here, but also when the film shows the vulnerability out of the ring, dealing with his demons of addiction, dealing with his very toxic relationship, and dealing with the idea of not being the best and what it means for someone that's at the top of their game and they lose for the first time, and how someone that's so used to winning, how do they react to losing for the first time. So I thought The Rock really did a good job in this performance. Emily Blunt, if you all do not know this, Emily was brought onto this project by Dwayne because of their friendships. He knew that he was going to have to go to certain levels that he'd really never explored in his acting career, and he needed someone that he can rely on, besides the director, obviously. And I thought Emily did a great job of being that person, being that literal punching bag, metaphorically speaking, and also just in this relationship. I would say for me, the fight scenes were fine, but the fights between them was electric. And not in a good way. Oh, I love toxicity. No, but I mean just what they brought to the codependency, to the toxicity of the relationship was some of the most dynamic scenes in this film, and just really tough to watch, very uncomfortable to watch as well. And I thought Emily really was great. Them together, whether it was, the terrible movie they did a couple years ago with Jungle Cruise, and I think that was the only other film they did. And then, of course, this one, great chemistry, great job by Emily, really good supporting. That is the definition of a supporting actress. She really supports The Rock in this movie. Bas, I can't think of his last name right now because there's the thing about the Safdie brothers. They like to put non-actors in their movies to kind of bring that authenticity. I like Bas. Bas was really great in this film as his trainer. I thought he was great. And the fighting elements, I think it did a good job of capturing the violent nature of UFC. But again, I thought the sports element was probably the least interesting element of this film. But before we get into the negatives, one more thing I want to mention. Great score. Phenomenal score. It captures that time in the 90s, and also the aesthetic, the cinematography was really, that grainy look, and kind of the very first scene just kind of brought you, you felt like you were in a time capsule. And then also the score. I really like the score. So those are some of the positives that I really enjoyed with this film. I kind of hinted at my negatives, but the sports element really kind of brought this film down to me because it didn't have the same punch. It just didn't have the visceral nature of the sport that I was hoping to see. Like I said, I thought the fighting between the boyfriend and girlfriend, between Mark and Donna, I think her name is, those were more interesting. Those were more compelling than the actual fights. The other thing, and this is just a biopic curse for me. Now, luckily, this only focuses on a small, a 3-year window of his life. We're not following, this, you're thrown right into it. You don't see him, how he got into the MMA. You don't see how he got into a relationship. It just throws you in a particular part of his life, which I actually prefer than, seeing someone's beginning to the end of their life or, towards the end of their life. But with that said, the film does not dive into the nitty-gritty of his addiction. Now, granted, not every addictive story has to be the same, where it's dark and nasty and disgusting and, just destructive. Not everyone has the same drug addiction story. But at the same time, the way this film handles that element is very safe. Pun intended, the gloves were on when it came to the more, darker, more mature. Mark Kerr is involved in making this film, and this is also based on the doc. I do wonder if there's one of those things where, creative liberties where the actual person is still alive didn't want his kids, didn't want his family to see those more darker moments. There's a scene in particular where he has a very, alarming health thing that happens to him. And the way the film handles that is why didn't we see that? We only see the aftermath. We didn't see any of the stuff building up or the stuff after what happens to him on a particular addiction. I'm why didn't we dive into that? So I will say the film plays it safe with the more dramatic and more very vulnerable moments of Mark Kerr's life, which is unfortunate because I think there is something to explore there, but I think the film just plays it too safe, scared to dive into those elements. But those are my positives. Those are my negatives. Is it a film that's worth seeing? I think so. It is. Again, it's kind of paid by numbers with the sports element. Straightforward story. Not everyone, has the most extraordinary life, and I think this film Unfortunately, Mark Kerr, there isn't the most exciting stuff to explore, so that kind of hinders the film, because there is a portion of the film that I thought was like, man, this is kind of getting a little uninteresting. I'm not really as hooked in as I was from the beginning and towards the end. But overall, I would say The Smash Machine, while underwhelming, is still a well-made film with really good performances, really surprising amount of tenderness when it comes to just capturing someone that has a good heart. So all in all, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5 for me for The Smash Machine. Good, not great. I was hoping that it would be great. But that's just my thoughts. I want to hear yours in the comments below. If you're a UFC fan, what did you think? If you're not a UFC fan, what did you think? Let me know. If you're a Rock fan like I am, where would you put this amongst his other performances? And do you think he's going to get nominated? I don't, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, like, share, comment, consider subscribing. Many reviews. Not only do I cover TV, but a lot of movie reviews coming soon. So make sure you hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss that. You all are awesome, and I'll see you on the next breakdown.